Okay, I'm gonna tell you my sourdough love story. And it goes way back. So just so you get like a background on like, who is this girl? Why is she talking about this? Like, it's one of her kids. It truly is. So my starter's been with me for like 8 years. So here's where it all began. I had my first oldest daughter almost 12 years ago. And as soon as it came time for her to have solid foods, I was terrified. I was like, wait, what? But she's perfect. Now I have to decide what to put in her body and like determine what like fuels her and nourishes her. Like, it was this huge responsibility that I felt. And I'm probably maybe alone in that, but I just felt this huge responsibility, this huge weight. And during that same time, I had a sister-in-law who was like, hey, you need to read this book. It's called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. Maybe you've heard of it. If you haven't, you should, because it's so good. And so I read it, and it was everything I needed. It was just talking about traditional food preparation methods and health and our bodies and the way we're designed, and sprouting and soaking grains, and just preparing foods in a way that made it so that our bodies could more easily digest and get the nutrients we needed from those foods. And I devoured it, and I was like, oh, this is amazing, right? So I went on and fed my daughter, all the things. I was a little bit intense, but a few years later, I had another sister-in-law who was like, hey, I took this natural yeast class. You need some of this starter. You would love it. And I was like, oh yeah, like Sally Fallon talks about that in her book, like sourdough, it's so good for you. That's awesome, So I got a starter, and I was like, playing around with it. It was fun, whatever. I didn't really think about it. I just thought, this is another way to make bread, because I had already been making bread. When I graduated college, my parents gave me some money, and the thing I wanted the most was a Bosch. So I bought my own Bosch mixer, and I had been making bread just with commercial yeast. So I was like, yeah, this is just another way to do it, but it takes a lot of work, so why wouldn't I just use this active yeast, right? This active dry or whatever. So then, next step in my journey, I got diagnosed gluten intolerant when I was pregnant 6 years ago with my last baby. The timeline, all the kids and the everything intertwines, but I got diagnosed gluten intolerant. Long story short, basically, I did the elimination diet and then reintroduced. It was like death when I reintroduced. It was so immediate, such a terrible reaction. So I was taking gluten out of my life while I was pregnant, and it was terrible, and I was so sad. I was devastated. I was like, I don't want to be a gluten-free person. And there just weren't as many resources then as there are now, right? Even 6 years ago, it was like barely being talked about, right? Like paleo was this thing that no one was talking about really. So I was taking gluten out. I had my baby in the middle of the night. Probably a month or two after he was born, I was nursing, and I had this huge aha light bulb moment where I had a page from the Nourishing Traditions book flash into my mind about sourdough starter being able to break down the gluten in bread to make it more easily digestible. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, I know I've read that, but you read a lot of things and it's like in and out. And so I was like, wait a minute, and started searching, and there were not as many resources. It was harder to find information, but I found what I was looking for, and I found that just all the science and all the good benefits of sourdough, and I was like, this is amazing. I am totally gonna try this, right? I'm gonna try eating this kind of bread and see what it does. I'm gonna experiment on myself, why not? So I did. I got my starter out of the back of the fridge. For those of you who have one hanging out back there, it is revivable, I promise, unless it's moldy, then please throw it away. So I got it out, I got it revived, and then I made bread, and I remember that first piece of toast, like it was yesterday, that first drink of water after a drought. It's after not having bread for months and months. It had probably been 6 or 7 months that I hadn't had any bread, and so I had that first piece of toast made from my natural yeast starter, and nothing happened. I waited, and nothing happened. Not even a twinge in my intestinal system. Nothing happened. And I was like, that's it, I'm doing it. So I started making all the things. I had already been blogging, so I just continued to blog about natural yeast and its benefits and teaching and creating recipes. And my goal with all of this was, okay, if I can just get people to make waffles once a week with a starter and just get it in their bodies, just get it in their kids' tummy, like that could be incredible. That could change so many lives just by doing that. So even if you're intimidated by the bread part, I promise you, just give it a shot and just use it. I have so many recipes and so many to share that will just get it in your body, okay? So my waffle recipe, it took me forever to create a good, solid recipe of waffles that my kids just devour. So that one is like my baby. I love that recipe. We've got crepes, we've got English muffins, like so many recipes to help you to use the starter and just get it in your body. And I'm gonna teach you all about that. So then for 4 years, after I had started creating recipes and educating online, I started teaching in-person classes, and I did that for 4 years and loved it. It was amazing. I love connecting with you guys. I love those of you who have been to my classes. It's just like this bond that we have. I taught in the Redmond farm stores in Utah. I taught all over in home classes in Idaho and Utah when we lived there, but it was so much work. I finally had to let it go. It was something that was just, my kids were so small, and it just wasn't worth the effort that I put into the classes to continue doing them. So that's my backstory with this starter stuff and why I love it so much, because it totally changed my health and my life and has helped so many other people. I have countless testimonials of moms who are like, my kid can eat your waffles and they don't hurt his tummy. And like that to me is the best thing I could ever hear. So while we're in quarantine and while we're doing this thing together, while we're all in our homes and slowing down a little and connecting a little more, I really just felt called to share everything that's in my mind. I have a whole class, I have a master class in my mind. So why don't I share that with you? I can get on here and do a video, no problem, and upload it. So that doesn't take as much time. So I wanted to share my story so you know who's talking to you and where I'm coming from. And I'm gonna give it all to you. So I hope you're ready. Giddy up, let's do this thing.